Thank you, Sebastian, very much. As one of the three German nationals in the room, may I thank you all for allowing us to speak English today. I wanted to start by highlighting two academic papers. One I must thank you for as well, Anna, for alerting me to, that came out in the last couple of years. One was by some Dutch colleagues, Laura Enthoven and Gödele van den Broek, who have done a systematic study of all the research that's been done, well, not all, but much of the research that's been done on local food over the last 20 years. And you can imagine there's been a lot. And the conclusion they came to was that there are different meanings associated with local food, depending on where you are and which functions you assign to local food. And that a key future task is to delve deeply into bilateral comparisons. So I'm glad that we're doing that here in detail today. We've heard about that already. Femina and Co. in Poland have also done some interesting work on CSAs, Community Supported Agriculture, and call for much deeper analysis of that. So again, we're ahead of the curve, I feel, here today. I'm just going to also thank my colleagues from Bristol, Steph and Eloise, who are in the audience today. You're having to listen to me give impressions about what's happening between the two countries. And, I hope that you'll tolerate what I'm about to say, and we'll add to it in the panels later on. I think Matt and I as well would like to thank all Norwegian colleagues. It's been a fascinating project and we've enjoyed it immensely. So there's not much time. So I'm going to really race through this. You've all been very scientific and quantitative and shown lots of graphs today. I'm going to give you some brief impressions. So for a start, as I was saying, the UK team, if you like, are Matt and I from the Countryside and Community Research Institute, part of the University of Gloucestershire, and our colleagues from the Bristol Food Network. And we've worked very closely, particularly with Anna and Freudis, linking the two work packages on producers and consumers. Anna was with us on secondment for several months as well at our university in Cheltenham and lived in Bristol. That was very useful indeed. And we explored barriers and opportunities around value creation for local food producers and food enterprises that are targeting the urban market or are based in the city. And we've got several published outputs and some more on the way. And here you can see a couple. And we, particularly under Anna's leadership, published a very extensive comparative report about work between Bristol and Oslo, some of which I'm sorry to hear is already out of date because businesses have come in and out of business since that report was published. So it shows just how dynamic the urban food marketplace is. And Sebastian's already mentioned the knowledge exchange study visit to Bristol, which included farmers. Tron came along to that, but also some opportunities to talk to policymakers in our region. And the Nibio pop at the back tells you in more detail about that. So there's not much time this morning. I'm going to focus on three things. It's really tempting to talk about a great many things, but I must focus on just three very quick things. And those are policy, the co-location and food and urbanism in the two countries, and then a few comments on market expectations. I'm then going to finish with a few comments about possible next steps for consideration. So in terms of public policies, we've heard already this morning about some really inspirational policies emerging in Norway. In Bristol, we have a very long history of consistent policy making at the municipal level, but also rather radical in its approach. Here you can see the bullet points that illustrate this progression. And a week today in Bristol, the City Council is going to launch its One City Good Food strategy as the latest in this line. Now, it's radical, the Bristol food policy approach, because for a long time it's been concerned with food justice, which when I started my career was called food access or food policy, poverty. But there is a persistent preoccupation in our country at the municipal level policy making around food with food and poverty, the idea that sustainable and healthy food should be available to all citizens. Now that's interesting in that it's persistent. It's also a challenge in this project where we've been talking about value-added opportunities for some urban-facing farmers in the exploitation of the marketplace. It's also indicative of a difference between our two countries, which is the level of inequality that we face in Britain compared to you in Norway. And it means that we ask ourselves questions regularly about how useful it is, how effective it is, how beneficial it is to develop city-scale food policies at the municipal level. Is that a really good thing? Because it means that cities with their executive mayors can be radical? Or is it difficult because it indicates an absence of effective policy making at the national level? You know, can we really expect the mayor of Bristol to solve food poverty because he/she haven't done it yet? And I put over here, the latest national food strategy, the plan, over which I've written, oh great, another plan. Because, these plans are good. This is a good plan, written by Dimbleby. It's a good plan. But the difference, I think, that we feel between Britain and what we've heard and experienced about our work with you in Norway is that the integration of policy making around food, I don't just mean agriculture, but around food at the municipal level and the national level is not optimal in Britain. The second thing I wanted to talk about is the co-location of commercial agriculture. Sebastian emphasized that earlier on, and the city. You've implied in the past, Sebastian, that it's almost the symbiotic relationship between cities and high quality farmland. That's a different situation a little bit in Britain, where we do see that clash that you mentioned much more around the vision for cities and the opportunities for integrating agriculture within them. When we did the farm visit, we visited we visited 4 actually, but I've listed these 3 because they were so stark. But we visited 3 farms. The first run by Catherine Utrecht Farm, where she's a family farm with many generations of experience of mixed farming, livestock mainly, on the very, very edge of Bristol, and she's under intense development pressure. And this is interesting in the light of Bristol City Council's persistent commitment to supporting urban food production. We spoke also to Lisa at Elm Tree Farm, which is a care farm run by a charity, and the workforce is a group of people with learning difficulties, and they are wedged on public land owned by the health authority on the edge of the motorway, but are highly productive and commercial. And then we heard from Stroud Community Supported Agriculture about their insecure land tenancies dotted around a valley. So I think there is still a problem for us in Britain in terms of integrating very innovative and mixed business models that we're seeing here within the city envelope and even on the edges of the cities. And we were noting with interest the Oslo strategy. Farmers play a central role in maintaining a living cultural landscape in the city of Oslo. I think the idea of a cultural landscape being an urban one is hugely fascinating and important. So maybe we can end this section on land by asking the question, how do we embrace commercial and semi-commercial agriculture as part of an efficient, green, urban system, which is close to diverse markets and that stimulates innovation? There's a lot in there, isn't there? But I think these are the things we've been seeing coming out of the exchange that we were involved with. I should also say, very lastly on this issue, around the issue of land quality, that in Britain, rather than having cities linked to good agricultural land, it's maybe the other way around, where where agricultural land is bound to cities. We have green belts, a post-Second World War construct, which doesn't take account of land quality necessarily. It's about protecting against urban expansion with usually agriculture, irrespective of the quality of the soil underneath of that land use. So that's another challenge I think we can learn from you sorry. Okay, so the last main point before I conclude is the idea of market expectations. And this is where the city really becomes interesting. In all of our cases, we've got these very diverse cities that reflect their historical roles as ports, having global populations, and that creates enormous opportunities, but it also shifts expectations. When you think about the kinds of messages attached to local food or often sustainable food, it's about seasonality and localism and short food supply chains. These are all things that we support within this project, but they have to be balanced against the reality that we have internationalized our port cities. They've always been international and they remain international marketplaces. Some interesting things are happening in Bristol, for example, where we've got restaurants from different backgrounds and different nationalities sourcing locally. And there's a really great opportunity, I think, through the development of new procurement technologies to link local production to non-local eating, if you know what I mean. Supermarkets dominate the UK system, and that's problematic for many local farmers. Interesting, though, that we interviewed a number of businesses that also have copied the kind of supra-seasonal buying in of produce so that their customers, which now expect this kind of convenience and diversity, can be met. But there remains a lot of hostility in Britain, and I understand less so in Norway, towards supermarkets because they don't prioritise the farmer. The convenience that supermarkets offer the consumer hasn't been balanced against the opportunities for producers. There is a high environmental motivation among the many groups that Eloise's network represents in Bristol. And as far as I understand it, that hostility or distrust towards the government is less evident here. The government is the place where citizens invest their hope and their faith in doing the right thing environmentally, I understand. That, I see from my colleagues' responses, is not quite so the case in our country, even in the current situation. And so the other thing, lastly then, is Bristol has been known for many, many years as a very dynamic and exciting place around food innovation. I think, I don't want to say but that comes with a great sense of diversity. In a way, all of this slide is about the diversity of the city, especially Bristol. And sometimes what that means is that the diversity is hard to get your hands round. Everybody's trying to do a range of different things, and it's important that we have groups like Bristol Food Network that can speak as an umbrella for many of them. So those are my three kind of key distinctions, I suppose. But what do I want to suggest next? Well, one thing we really enjoyed a lot, and I don't just mean enjoyed because it was fun, but we benefited from, was the idea of practice-based exchange. I think that trip to Bristol was good. It was great to see producers talking over the geographical divide. And I think we'd like to see much, much more of that. I'm seeing that in other projects as well. Practice-based knowledge exchange is valuable and it brings results. I think another thing I'm seeing often is that there is very little evidence often between the causal impacts of some kind of intervention and the original investment. So, we see through this pedigree of policymaking in Bristol, for example, a great faith that the future will be better. But really, I would urge us to, and we've seen this happening already. Rosa, you evidence this in your presentation. What actually are the outcomes, the real outcomes between investment in these sorts of activities and innovations and policies, and what are the benefits? How can we measure them? We're finding this after 25 years worth of faith in the idea that cultural-led urban regeneration helps competitiveness. Well, it doesn't actually. It's really hard to say that. It's really hard to say that for sure. So we need new ways to measure direct causal outcomes from investments in urban food policy making. We need to strengthen the links between rural and urban places. We've seen that very, very clearly in this project, and this is because urban food demand has a territorial reach. So the idea that Sebastian started with, that the countryside is where farming happens and the city is where it doesn't happen, that has to be challenged, not least because of the multiple functions of urban-based agriculture. And I think, this is another way of saying, how can we really foster diversity in innovation, in business models, in products, in processing? How can we really diversify that so that we can get the best ideas out? And that does need more secure land tenures, and it needs investment in skills and business development. DPS is this digital technology, dynamic procurement systems, that seems to be revolutionizing local food sourcing and agglomeration of logistics. And then I just wanted to end with this quote: culture is fundamental to the urban process. How do we make that happen? How does agriculture become fundamental to the urban process? Because I can tell you from other research, it always has been in Europe. Thank you very much.